Hello, my name is Pil Ho Kim. I'm an assistant professor of Korean Studies at The Ohio State University. Along with my co-author, Won-Suk Lee, who's a PhD student in ethnomusicology at The Ohio State, we wrote an article entitled Industrial Hip Hop Against Hip Hop Industry, The Critical Noise of XXX, a South Korean hip hop duo. So this article and presentation was first prepared for PopCon, which was going to take place in May, and there was obviously delay and now switched to online. In the meantime, we were able to finish the article and submitted it, and it has been accepted for publication by Journal of World Popular Music. So hopefully it's going to be soon available to you. Let me start off by introducing the duo. There is the rapper named Kim Shimya, Kim being the family name, and Shimya is nom de guerre for a guy whose real name is Kim Dong-hyun. The other one, his partner, is beatmaker, DJ, producer Frank, and his real name is Park Jin-soo. The sensational hip-hop duo XXX have made their name by openly taunting South Korea's national hip-hop scene, colloquially known as gukhip, through their lyrics and by appealing directly to the global underground hip-hop audience through their sound. In this presentation, we will analyze the unsettling yet compelling sonic features of XXX's records, Gyomi in 2016, Language in 2018, and Second Language in 2019. At the same time, we will attempt to contextualize Shimya's verbal assault on the Korean music entertainment industry in general and the gukhip scene in particular. Frank's noisy beats are heavily influenced by industrial hip-hop, the origin of which can be traced all the way back to late 1970s-80s industrial music from Britain. Historically speaking, the avant-garde aesthetics of early industrial music had an affinity for critical social commentaries from the post-punk scene. Experimental trap, XXX's other source of musical influence, is also important in understanding Shimya's loathing of gukhip. While the latter has turned into a glitzy, money-making industry, Shimya identifies himself as a struggling street rapper living the hard life. As XXX strives to overcome the detrimental trappings of the gukhip industry, we'll assess how the congruence of sound and message may work to the duo's advantage. It may seem paradoxical to even mention congruence when XXX's musical specialty is to mix in discordant noise and employ mostly confrontational lyrics. However, taken together, sound and message in XXX are closely aligned in a singular mission to attack the complacency of the Korean hip-hop community. To comprehend the significance of XXX's critical noise in their local context, we will first examine how hip-hop has established itself in the Korean music entertainment industry, followed by a genealogy of industrial hip-hop in which XXX can be seen as the latest offshoot. Since its inception, hip-hop has spread across various racial, national, and ethnic lines, adapting itself to different historical and cultural contexts. In Korea, where nationalism has held sway over cultural practices and discourses since the dawn of the modern era, hip-hop was localized within a national or nationalist framework. There is little doubt that Seo and Boyce's 1992 debut single, 난 알아요, I Know, was the first song that popularized rap and hip-hop culture on the national scale. For nearly 3 decades since, hip-hop has been an indomitable force, transforming Korean soundscapes as a staple ingredient of mainstream K-pop. Among idol dance groups in Seotaeji's wake, from H.O.T. in the late 1990s to BTS today, it is now the norm for these groups to include rap verses in songs or rappers in lineups. The so-called Big Three of the K-pop industry, SM Entertainment, JYP Entertainment, and YG Entertainment, all provide rap classes for their trainees. At the same time, hip-hop has also proliferated as an underground subculture. Over primitive dial-up internet in small clubs and live venues, and through independent record labels, aspiring rappers and DJs made their names known and created hip-hop communities. From the beginning, authenticity was a key point of contention among all stakeholders in Korean hip-hop culture, who included artists in the mainstream K-pop industry, in the underground subculture, or in between, members of fan communities, as well as broadcasters, promoters, critics, and other music industry gatekeepers. Here again, the national framework mattered a great deal, especially in the formative years of Korean hip-hop. Korean hip-hop was contending for authenticity on two fronts, one across the national racial linguistic border, and the other across the mainstream underground divide. Today's Korean hip-hop is probably far less concerned about authenticity in national/linguistic terms, because it has matured musically and lyrically by leaps and bounds. In the meantime, hip-hop's rising commercial value in the music entertainment industry paved the way for Show Me the Money, SMTM, a widely popular hip-hop reality TV audition show launched on the music cable network Mnet, which is Korean equivalent to MTV. Since its inaugural season in 2012, SMTM has firmly established itself as the arbiter and ultimate gatekeeper of commercial success, for better or worse. Over 8 seasons, SMTM has been particularly important for aspiring rappers early in their careers. Some of them have bragged about the money and fame they found after making appearances on the program. For example, the young rapper Shitsu revealed in an interview that his performance fee increased by a factor of 15 after appearing on SMTM 2016. Another young rapper, Nafla, when asked about his motivation for competing on SMTM 2018, simply answered, quote, "to make money." And for that he received a loud ovation for his brutal honesty. The lure of money in Korean hip-hop, as clearly spelled out in the title of the show, has only grown over time along with the global reach of the music entertainment industry. By the time XXX hit the scene, Korean hip-hop was completing localization into gukhip and increasingly embracing its own commercial prospects. XXX took an unusual road to fame in both the global and local hip-hop scenes. The duo is still a lesser-known underground act in Korea, partly because it has shunned SMTM. XXX seems to wear its distaste for SMTM as a badge of honor. XXX instead has received substantial media coverage from Billboard, Pitchfork, and other such influential international outlets since its debut in 2016, and going on to perform at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas, the following year, 2017. Granted, XXX is not the first Korean underground hip-hop act whose international fame preceded domestic success. That particular honor goes to Keith Ape, whose single Itji Ma even made a splash on the pages of the New York Times in 2015. Re-import, in Korean 역수입, is the term often used for those artists who get a second look in the domestic market thanks to their international stature. By that definition, both Keith Ape and XXX are Korean hip-hop re-imports via the United States. Indeed, the closest match for XXX's sound among the myriad of contemporary hip-hop subgenres would be industrial hip-hop, represented by such genre-bending experimentalists as Death Grips, Clipping, and JPEG Mafia, among others. In particular, an interesting comparison can be made between XXX and JPEG Mafia, whose abrasive sound and radical politics harken back to the early years of industrial music. Although, as far as we know, Frank has not made any specific reference to industrial hip-hop or to the industrial music tradition, the affinity is unmistakably there. One visible link between XXX and American industrial hip-hop is Jay Dilla, the late record producer, DJ, beatmaker extraordinaire from Detroit, whose immense contribution to contemporary hip-hop is still underappreciated, as recently lamented by JPEG Mafia. In an interview, Frank has mentioned Dilla's influence on his own production style. Another link that connects XXX with industrial music is popular mainstream bands such as Radiohead and Portishead, whose dalliances with noise music made an impression on Frank during his teenage years in the 2000s. However, it is unclear if he ever traced the genealogies of noise music back to the 20th century industrial music tradition. In fact, the influence of industrial music has been so widespread through various genres and styles of popular music that it is plausible for a musician unaware of the historical connections to incorporate its aesthetics unwittingly. And what you see here is a chart created by Woods in 2007, who traces a complex web of historical influences and genre connections at the time when industrial hip-hop had not yet established itself as a recognized subgenre. Industrial music may still be considered avant-garde in the Korean context, where more accessible styles, industrial rock or metal, have rarely been adopted by local acts. In that sense, XXX are not merely following a cutting-edge trend in global hip-hop, but they are also assimilating a long tradition and refashioning it into a new cultural experiment or intervention. Therefore, it is no surprise to hear XXX echo scathing critiques that some notable industrial bands have made against capitalist society. But as we shall see later, XXX's message is narrower and their sound groovier than what one might expect from a typical avant-garde noise act. Rather, XXX seem to know the limits of the noisy experimentation they bring to the gukhip scene, and they tend to play within the limits instead of running roughshod over them. And now at this point, my co-author Won-Seok Lee will take over and give his analysis of XXX's extraordinary beat and groove patterns.
As of this point, we're gonna look at musical characteristics of XXX. As mentioned previously, what distinguishes XXX from gukhip is primarily the way Frank manipulates beats and sounds. Whereas a majority of gukhip songs maintain an explicit backbeat performed by the snare drum on beats 2 and 4 in 4/4 meter, Frank often manipulates the backbeat by stopping or inserting it at different points. Take the introduction to Sujak from Language, for example. The mixed sounds of claps and snare with reverb create an accented backbeat, which is often played in an offbeat position. For those ears attuned to ordinary hip-hop beats, it sounds unusual and unpredictable. Let's take a listen.
Strip club casket, body in that basket. Still here, basement, fucks with that plasma. Fucks wrong on paper, stuck with my asthma. 흩뿌리는 팁, 부시는 빈곤의 격차. 무리는 일수 죽이는 짓 돈을 번담. 뿌리 못 내리는 송판들 연타로 깨지면 애매한 내용의 이 가사처럼 파산 때리고 취업난해 할 줄 아는 게 없다는 얘기는 진퇴양 나네니까 너무 난해. 개또라이도 아닌데 십연예인도 아닌 음악하는 학생 정도 명작들이나 정독 수작들은 작품으로 치지도 않 그럼 내건 네 맘을 개죽같이 먹힐 듯 안 먹히는 뽐새는 애물단지 내가 이러고도 한국에서 뜨겠다는 놈이 도대체 쓰는 가사마다 빠진 꼬부랑이.
Then a typical 8-beat pattern is played after the first verse. However, the 8-beat pattern is not maintained for long. Rather, after 4 measures without the drum sound, Frank adopts a different rhythmic pattern that puts the backbeat on the 3rd beat. Let's take a listen.
Body in that basket, still here, basement. Fucks wrong on paper, stuck with my asthma. 흩뿌리는 팁, pushing.
This rhythmic feature may make audiences feel like the song has changed to a slower flow, even though the tempo stays the same. XXX deployed similar patterns earlier, in Flight Attendant and Liquor from Kyomi, as well as in Ganjugok from Language and Ua from Second Language, for example. XXX experiment with rhythm goes back to their debut EP Kyomi and Dior Homme in particular. This song, Dior Homme, reveals another distinct rhythmic feature of XXX, which is the transition of groove within a song. Groove is a rather elusive term musicologically, but in this paper, we will adopt the following definition, quote, the result of a musical process that is often identified as a vital drive or rhythmic propulsion. It involves the creation of rhythmic intensity appropriate to the musical style or genre being performed, end quote. Once the song settles on the certain kind of groove, it is usually maintained throughout. However, in Dior Homme, Frank starts the song with a swing groove and then switches to a straight groove. In the introduction of Dior Homme, both the instrumental and Shimia's rapping express triplet subdivisions. Let's take a listen.
Oh, you didn't trendsetter. Ooh, I didn't know, well, I killed the trend. Oh, you didn't trendsetter. Oh, you didn't trendsetter. Ooh, I didn't know, well, I killed the trend. 하여간 병신들에게 저거 질러. Oh, you didn't trendsetter. Oh, you didn't trendsetter.
The aforementioned groove transition takes place in the first chorus, from swing to a 16th straight groove, commonly found in disco music. Let's take a listen.
끝물에 단물 빠져가는 유행이 나 더 빠르. Shit is in it coming, bitch shit is in it coming. 너무 당연하지. 어쩔 줄 모르는 너의 바지통이 공문이 쫓는 너의 음악 과제를 올려면 fuck this shit, you love this shit, you know. 고민 없는 컬렉션이 이토록 빨릴 줄이야. 요즘 아이돌이니 뭐도 요즘 아이돌도 너 정도는 다 털어. Oh my, ooh, bitches on that German.
Frank's experimentation with grooves does not end there. In Desk Job, Frank not only shows off Delight's beat-making skills, but also creates a highly elusive groove in the intro parts that falls somewhere between straight and swing. The unpredictable beat patterns and transitional grooves are combined with XXX's signature noise, which a Korean newspaper described as, quote, the sound from welding sparks and grinding iron bars, like the soundscape of a penitentiary under construction, end quote. Obviously, these industrial noises were not made by real, physical machines and tools. Even in the early days of industrial music, they were largely created electronically, as the members of a Throbbing Gristle attest. As previously mentioned, electronic noise and glitch have become part of the sound arsenal that big-time mainstream acts like Radiohead and Portishead deploy frequently. For instance, Portishead's Machine Gun from Third features a sampled drum machine beat that eerily presages the drum beat in Trust from Language, which indeed sounds like a machine gun fire. Trap, another major source of XXX's distinct sound, makes its clearest mark in Ganjugok, which begins with the sunny string chamber section, followed by the menacing Roland 808 drum machine, sub-bass a musical about-face akin to Childish Gambino's This Is America, which is a trap song that came out in the same year as Ganjugok. Ganjugok starts with the string chamber section, and then the violin solo melody follows along with the marching drum pattern. Let's take a listen. After the introduction, Ganjugok shifts to full-blown trap. In the rhythm part, the 808 drum machine replaces the acoustic drums. The rhythmic pattern of backbeat manipulation in Sujak appears here as well. Let's take a listen. Undoubtedly, XXX stretches the musical limits of gukhip, but their sounds and beats are not untested, purely experimental noise out of the blue. They work with already proven sounding materials, giving them enough twist to mount an effective challenge to mainstream hip-hop, both global and domestic.
Thank you, Wonseok. Now I'm back, and we're going to talk a little bit about XXX's message, its rebellious stance against the South Korean hip-hop industry known as gukhip. By virtue of taking in such politically loaded genres as industrial and trap, Frank sets a perfect soundstage for Shimya to step onto and let loose his cynically sinister flow. In many songs, from Gyomi in particular, and in media interviews, Shimya sounds like an angry young man of Korea who has been slighted by the hyper-consumerism of the quote-unquote gold-spoon rich and their wannabes. He also alludes to bad experiences during his pre-collegiate study abroad in the United States. Most importantly, he gives the youth-exploiting music entertainment industry as good a tongue-lashing as anyone could. In the song, Dior Homme, he takes aim at those in the gukhip scene who, in his view, merely follow trends without critical self-reflection. They are no better than inauthentic K-pop idol groups. One of the presumed reasons Pitchfork magazine started paying attention to XXX is that its Korean-American reviewers were capable of decoding the message behind the bilingual lyrics precisely in their local context. And here I will block quote from Michelle Kim's review of XXX's language in Pitchfork. Quote, "While language repeatedly takes aim at the overwhelmingly high pressures of the Korean music industry, Shimya's frustrations are nuanced as he portrays his internal conflict of wanting to succeed within the system that is actively trying to fight. On the song Ugly, he raps, quote, this ranking system and poverty is effing my mentality. In the end, my music doesn't reach the charts. And on What You Want, he illustrates how easy it is to find himself slipping back into the capitalistic ethos. His train of thought begins to unravel. Art is human, human is greed, ergo greed is money." Apparently, the ranking system Shimya refers to is SMTM, which has ravaged Korea's underground hip-hop culture by plucking talented individuals from the scene and pitting them against one another in front of the unforgiving national TV audience. In a magazine interview, Shimya does not hide his disgust with fellow hip-hop artists who change their tune about SMTM once they succumb to its allure. SMTM is often criticized for its unfair audition process. Some contestants are seasoned professional rappers who have already built personal relationships with the judges, while others are upstarts with little connection to the gukhip industry. public accusations of favoritism among some of the participants has brought the infamous label A League of Their Own to the show. Nonetheless, SMTM still reigns supreme over gukhip. When Shimya was asked if he would ever appear on SMTM, he begrudgingly answers, "Gun to my head, yes." Everyone, including XXX, is aware of the might of SMTM, which simply cannot be ignored. From the viewpoint of underground hip-hop, it may not be an overstatement to say that there has been, quote, an intense struggle between authenticity and commodification in the subculture, where commodification completely dominates authenticity. This in turn undermines hip-hop's rebellious ideology and acts to completely industrialize hip-hop culture in Korea, end quote. And this comes from Hare and Baker's 2017 article. XXX's resistance strategy is to blast out industrial noise at this industrialization of culture. And their fame comes from a radically different path, re-import from the hip-hop motherland. How viable this new path will be for XXX and other like-minded acts in the long run remains to be seen, but at least it has left an unsettling effect on gukhip authenticity ensconced in the national framework. Okay, that's all for our presentation. If you have any questions or comments, please join me at the live Q&A session at the PopCon. I hope to see you there.